Hi, I'm Choa. Today I want to talk about Rook Joseki. So first of all, this is table of contents. So Rook Basics, 2 types of Rook. Only one thing to remember in opening, Joseki Foundation, and Joseki for rapid game, and Joseki for waiting game. A review. Okay, so Rook Basics. So ranging rook, or in general, is a defensive strategy. And usually castle into Mino, so Mino castle is, this. And opening, which Cho loves to play. Okay, so 2 types of Rook. So there are 2 types, and one is normal Rook and more defensive, and the other is Ishida style, and it is more aggressive. I play both, and one way to distinguish between them is your opponent. To be more specific, so like you move pawn to 7-6, and if the opponent moves pawn to 8-4, you should move rook to 7-8, and if the opponent moves pawn to 3-4, you should move pawn to 7-5. The reason you should move is that, so like let's say if the opponent moves pawn to 3-4 and you move rook to 7-8, then the opponent will move. So bishop takes 8-8 and takes and drop bishop here. So basically, that's not good for block. So, and also like if the opponent moves pawn to 8-4 and you move pawn to 7-5, then the opponent will move pawn to 8-5 and bishop to 7-7, bishop to pawn to 3-4, and he's trying to trade this bishop, and basically he's just move pawn and break second 8 file. So that's why you should move rook to 7-8 if the opponent moves pawn to 8-4, and you should move pawn to 7-5 if the opponent moves pawn to 3-4. Okay, so 2 types of Rook review. Okay, so pawn to 7-6, and if pawn to 8-4, blank, and if pawn to 3-4, blank. So the answer is rook to 7-8 and pawn to 7-5. Like only one thing to remember in opening. It's really stressful to remember many things in the opening, right? Since normal Rook is a defensive strategy, only one thing to remember is watch your opponent. So basically, there are 2 types of game, which is rapid and waiting. So if your opponent plays rapid game, you should be prepared for the opponent's attack. And if your opponent plays waiting game, you should develop Mino castle and attack with good timing. Alright, so review. Depending on the blank's formation, you should decide your formation. So rapid game, be prepared for blank's attack, and waiting game, develop Mino castle and blank with good timing. So the answer is the opponent and attack. Let's be more specific, and let's move on to the Joseki Foundation. Okay, so to start off with pawn to 7-6, like I said before, pawn to 8-4, and then rook to 7-8, then pawn to 8-5. Actually, so let's say if the opponent moves pawn to 3-4, you can move pawn to 7-5 and play Ishida style, or whatever. You can move pawn to 6-6 and close bishop diagonal line. Both ways are fine. Okay, so pawn to 8-5 and bishop to 7-7. So I explained why you have to move bishop to 7-7 in the other videos. So if you haven't watched it yet, please watch. So then pawn to 3-4 and pawn to 6-6 and silver to 6-2 and silver to 6-8 and king to 4-2, and king to 4-8, and king to 3-2, and king to 3-8, and pawn to 1-4. Also, you should move h pawn. Okay, so goes to 5-2, and king to 2-8, and pawn to 5-4, and saber to 3-8. That's a foundation of Joseki. I forgot to say one thing, so basically you're just castling into mini castle. Okay, so now that the opponent has two choices, so one is rapid and the other is waiting. So one example of rapid game is this, pawn to 7-4. And if he does that, then you move gold to 5-8. And the opponent has two types of attack in general. So for, one is this, and the other is this. Okay, so let's take a look to see one of them. So one is silver to 5-7. If he does that, you should move silver to 6-7, and silver to 6-4, pawn to 5-6, and pawn to 7-5. If he does that, you could take this pawn, but I will recommend this bishop. So bishop to 6-8, and then, for example, pawn to 7-6, rook takes 7-6, pawn drop 7-5, rook to 7-8, rook to 7-2, and bishop to 4-6. And next, you will move pawn to 6-5, and if takes, then takes lance. Okay, so the another type of attack, rapid attack, is pawn to 6-4. If he does that, you will have many choices, and it's really confusing. So just move silver to 6-7. Actually, it's not the best option, but I will recommend this because it's most simple. Okay, so actually I explained this in the other videos, so just I'm gonna just explain very first thing. So let's say the opponent moves knight to 7-3, and you move pawn to 4-6. So if the opponent does nothing, so for example, let's see, silver to 4-2, and pawn to 3-6, and silver to 5-3, you should castle into high mino, so this formation. Or if the opponent moves pawn to 6-5, then it's really important that you shouldn't take this pawn. Actually, it's a blunder. So if you move that, then bishop takes 7-7, knight takes, and pawn to 8-6, and ace file is broken, so that's not good for black. And very basic thing, but so if you play ranging rook, you should move rook that is being attacked, which means rook to 6-8. Now the opponent has many choices, so it's not easy to win or something, but if you remember this thing, don't worry. Okay, so now let's go back and see another example, which is waiting game. Okay, so now the opponent moves pawn to 5-4, and king to 2-8, and silver to 5-3, and silver to 3-8, and just complete mini castle. And then bishop to 3-3. So one of the most famous waiting strategy is Anaguma. So what is it? Anaguma Castle is really formidable. Can you see these pieces are all connected? And it makes really strong castle. So let's move. Goes to 5-8. And king to 2-2. Let's move silver to 6-7. And move lance to 1-2. And silver to 5-6. The opponent usually doesn't move edge pawn. Now the opponent has many choices. For example, king to 1-1 or pawn to 5-5 or pawn to 4-4 or silver to 4-4. But one of the major move is pawn to 4-4 or silver to 4-4. Okay, so let's look at pawn to 4-4 first. Then you will move bishop to 5-9. And if king to 1-1, then you will move pawn to 7-5 and rook to 8-4 to prevent pawn to 7-4. But then there's good move, which is bishop to 9-5. And if rook to 9-4, then pawn to 9-6. And there's limited spaces the opponent's rook can move. And if the opponent moves rook to 8-2, then pawn to 7-4 takes, pawn drop, and rook to 8-4 and offers trade. Basically, he has to trade because if he escapes, then I can take this knight. So rook takes 8-4, and bishop takes 8-4, and the black is advantageous or has a large advantage. Okay, so let's go back, and if the opponent moves silver to 4-4, it seems kind of different, but it's really similar. So you will move silver to 7-5. Then, if the opponent moves king to 1-1, then bishop to 5-9 again, and rook to 8-4 and bishop to 9-5 again. So basically you're just doing same things. So if rook to 9-4, then pawn to 9-6, and if rook to 8-2, then pawn to 7-4. And again, the black has an advantageous. Okay, so let's review. So there are two types of Surfer Rook. One is normal Surfer Rook, and it is more defensive, and the other is Ishidasa, and it is more aggressive. And pawn to 7-6, and if pawn to 8-4, then rook to 7-8 like this. And if pawn to 3-4, then pawn to 7-5 like this. Okay, so Joseki Foundation. If you remember this formation, you're good. Basically, move rook and castle into Mino. So if opponent prefers rapid game, be prepared for it. So one example is this, or the other is this. If the opponent prefers waiting game, develop Mino and or attack with good timing. So one example or this. Thank you for watching. I will so appreciate it if you have any feedbacks. For example, was it too easy or too hard, or was it helpful or not, etc. Thank you for watching. Your like and comment will motivate me. Thanks for watching and see you again.